So far I was trying to give an idea of the concept of meditation and the characteristics of a person of steady wisdom who is a practitioner of this meditation and spiritual practice. Now, meditation as a subject is explained in detail in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. I was giving an idea of the meditative process expounded not only in the Gita but also in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. Now, if you have got any subject, any topic that you would like me to discuss, we can have a discussion. And after that, I shall go into the 6th chapter in detail. So, you can suggest some of the ideas which you want me to discuss. In fact, we have a plan later on, not now, to take classes on Patanjali's yoga philosophy, which will be very helpful to all practitioners of Hatha Yoga also, yogic exercises. Because the Hatha Yoga as it's known, that we practice, that generally people practice for health, is just one aspect of yoga as a philosophy and yoga as a way of life, explained in detail in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. That's the name of the text that we will deal with later. Now, if you have got any topic to suggest that you want me to discuss, you can suggest anything related to Gita or meditation. Any general topic related to spirituality or spiritual tradition. Because most of you must be familiar with many of these ideas. Its relevance in modern times and some of the topics which perhaps you feel that I perhaps didn't emphasize enough, you can just suggest and I can try to explain in detail. So far we are dealing in general, and after this interaction we will go back to the 6th chapter, the beginning of the 6th chapter of the Gita. Please.
I'm not sure if it'll be appropriate, but I'm wondering if the Gita offers something other than meditation to help us overcome, the patterns that we perpetuate in our behavior and in our thinking.
Patterns of behavior.
Yes.
In our thinking.
In our behavior and in our thinking.
Yes. Gita gives a detailed exposition of human characteristics. Twofold human characteristics. It comes in the 16th chapter. Devasura Sambad Vibhaga Yoga. It is. There, it divides human characteristics into the divine and the diabolic, the demoniac, as it's called. Normal human characteristics. So, ahimsa satya krodha tyaga shantiravaishunam daya bhudeshu aloluptum madhavam hrihi achaparam. In this way, Lord Krishna gives nearly 24 characteristics. See, first one is ahimsa. I'll give you an example. Ahimsa means non-violence. Not only non-violence as an act, but non-violence as an attitude of human mind. Non-violence as a philosophy, as an attitude towards ourselves and towards the external world. That, in fact, if one practices non-violence in action, in word and deed, and also in thought, he will have no conflicts within his mind or her mind. It helps him or her to lead a compact, integrated life. So that's the first characteristic which Krishna deals with. I shall just give a brief description of that chapter, and in a way it's very important because it directly deals with the human characteristics. Well, the chapter is called, in Sanskrit, is called Deva Asura Sambad Vibhaga Yoga. It means the divine and the demoniac types of human beings. Not that Gita divides the entire humanity, the entire human family, into good men and bad men. It's not that. See, you cannot have a watertight compartment. You cannot just draw a line of demarcation between one group, separating it completely from another group. These characteristics, these human traits are present in all of them. So Gita gives a detailed description of how one can reduce and ultimately remove all evil or undesirable patterns of human behavior and concentrate more and more on the divine. The divine means good. It's called sattvic. And this is based on one fundamental principle in Vedanta. According to Vedanta, every soul is potentially divine. In the sense, the divine becoming God, what we normally call God in organized religions, is called in Vedanta as a supreme consciousness. But one point we remember is this supreme consciousness is present in all living beings. For example, electricity is present here. So when you have this mechanism, this machine, then electricity takes the form of light. If I got another mechanism, then electricity manifests differently. Heat energy, light energy, and so on. Now, every human being is potentially divine, depending upon our characteristics, our tendencies. This power manifests. Now, how to manifest more and more this divinity within? That is the subject of discussion in this chapter. How to manifest the divine means the godly qualities, the spiritual qualities. Spiritual qualities means the divine qualities, which are inherent in every living being. Because every human being is inherently, potentially, essentially non-different from the universal spirit, according to Vedanta. This is the point. Every living being. So if anybody commits an error, it's because he is not aware of this inner divinity. And as a result of this lack of awareness, a person may commit deeds which we normally call bad actions. And when he becomes aware of his inner divinity, he can slowly remove the evil propensities and tendencies. The first verse, as I already mentioned, Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavastitihi Dhanam Dhamascha Yajnascha Swadhyaya Tapa Arjavam Ahimsa Satyam Akrodas Tyaga Shanti Rapaishunam Daya Bhodeshu Aloluptum Mardavam Krihi Achakaram. I shall give just a few a list of these ideas, and I shall explain in English in detail. Now, Lord Krishna says, he gives a list of the divine, the spiritual, the sattvic, the desirable qualities, which everyone should try to develop within him, so that he can manifest this divinity more and more. The first one is fearlessness, purity of heart, steadfastness in knowledge and devotion, benevolence, control of the senses, worship, study of scriptures, means holy books, austerity, means leading an austere life, uprightness, I shall explain in detail. Then non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation. Renunciation here means giving up, giving up too much attachment towards worldly pleasures. Aversion to slander, compassion to living beings, freedom from sensuality, gentleness, modesty, steadfastness. The list continues. Shall I explain? Vigor, patience, fortitude, purity, harmlessness, freedom from vanity, all these are present among those who develop divine qualities. This is a description of Lord Krishna. The first one mentioned is fearlessness. Fear is always rooted in the idea that I and my neighbor are two different beings. That is the basis of fear. If we can develop the idea of unity, the understanding that the entire creation is one spiritual entity, then we can't have fear. So it is said in some of the ancient books in Vedantic tradition that in ancient times, in the hermitages of great sages, wild animals used to come and stay together. The tiger, lions, elephants, snakes, creatures which are normally prone to do evil, they will come and stay together. Deers and lions, deers and tigers. Such stories are given in many of the ancient classics related to Vedantic tradition. The reason given is they were not afraid of each other. A deer won't be afraid of a lion staying together. There is a psychological reason given here. You see the first characteristic given in the second verse, ahimsa, means non-violence. In the presence of a sage, in the presence of a person of divine qualities, who is tranquil, calm and peaceful, even animals will feel that they don't have to fear anyone. In the presence of a person who is established in non-violence will transmit this characteristic to all other living beings. You can very easily see in the presence of anyone who is tranquil, who is peaceful, who won't hate anyone, in his or her presence, you also feel a feeling we are elevated. In the presence of people, on the other hand, in the presence of people who may be slightly different, who are prone to violence, prone to hatred, our mind also gets affected. We lose our peace of mind. Somehow conflicts and confusion comes. In the presence of anyone who is established in perfect non-violence, that's characteristic given here, ahimsa. Now, there's a 10th quality. 10th quality. See, in the second verse, one important quality is given, that is ahimsa, means non-violence. Non-violence not only in action, as I said earlier, it should be a natural attitude towards life and towards the entire creation around. If we can never think in terms of violence or hatred, then in your presence, others also will feel the same. You will transmit this ideal of non-violence, peacefulness, tranquility to others. There's a great story mentioned in the life of Arthur Osborne. He was an American Orientalist. he later became a great admirer of Ramana Maharshi. Ramana Maharshi was one of the sages, well-known sages in India in 20th century. Well, I mentioned his life last time. He as a young boy, as a young man, 17, 18 years old, he left his home and went to the temple, and then he chose to meditate in a cave near a mountain, and he meditated for a long time. So many people who had no way to become aware of the existence of such a saint or sage happened to hear about him and felt drawn towards him. And he says in his writings, when he went to his place in Arunachala, the cave, when he sat in front of him, he felt a perfect calmness, tranquility and inner peace. Such stories are mentioned in many places. You might have heard of Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, at least somehow. He was the teacher of Swami Vivekananda. Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa was living in a temple. And people used to come to him and used to talk to them about God, about non-violence, against meditation, about spiritual qualities that everyone should try to develop. One of his most prominent disciples, who later became the chronicler of his teachings, Mahendranath Gupta, the author of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, which contains Sri Ramakrishna's teachings. This man had left the previous night to commit suicide because of domestic problems, internecine problems, war, conflicts between his relations, huge family. So one night, 10:30 at midnight, he left his home with his wife and wandered about the city of Kolkata. This happened, you have to remember, in 19th century, most probably in the year 81, around that time, 82, around that time. And then next day, evening, he happened to come to Dakshineshwar, a temple where Sri Ramakrishna was living, talking to people who went there to meet him about God, about spirituality, about meditations, and so on. So this man, who had left his home to commit suicide due to domestic problems, when he saw Sri Ramakrishna and he was talking to some disciples, immediately he felt, who is this man? There is so much of peace, tranquility and calmness in his face. I feel as if somebody is drawing me towards him. What happened? Again he went there to see Sri Ramakrishna next day. Within a few days, he became a regular visitor. He became Sri Ramakrishna's disciple. And later, he started writing in his diaries. Whatever he heard, Sri Ramakrishna advising his disciples. Whatever he heard, he wrote down in his diary, which has now become well known as the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna. It's a famous classic, spiritual classic. Aldous Huxley, Mahatma Gandhi, and many great men, great writers, and prominent philosophers and women, great women, have praised that book as an immortal spiritual classic of modern times. So you can just see, Sri Ramakrishna was established in all these qualities. See, non-violence, fearlessness, etc. So in the presence of such a person, we also feel elevated. We feel a transforming effect on our mind. Purity of heart. So when you feel that yourself and the entire creation are one spiritual family, parts of one spiritual family, when you feel non-separation, non-distinction from other beings, you feel a unity, a oneness of human family, then you are not afraid of anyone. This fearlessness is not the fearlessness of a soldier in battlefield. It's the fearlessness of spiritual wisdom, rooted in one's own spiritual experience. So that is why abhayam is one. Abhayam here means fearlessness. Then purity of heart. So all these come together. See, utter fearlessness in the spiritual sense comes only out of the realization, the experience that there is nothing, no one to be afraid of, because there is nothing, no one different from me. So there is no enemy for me, because there is no one who is essentially different from me. The complete unity of existence. That's the spiritual foundation, the experience foundation of this quality. And benevolence will be universal broad-mindedness. See, spirituality is based on experience. Spirituality is something which we can only experience, that we cannot explain or describe. But it has got one universal expression. If you read the lives and teachings of great spiritual persons, you find they were extremely broad-minded. The benevolence. Not confined to their own family, their own people, their own friends, their own relations, no. Their own countrymen, no. They were universal in outlook. So as one progresses in his inward journey or in her inward journey in spiritual life, as he manifests the inner divinity within through good action, good word and good thoughts, as he evolves spiritually, his attitude towards others becomes more and more universal, more and more broad-minded. So, that's what really happens. And then, study of scriptures, austerity, uprightness, these are the natural qualities for people, natural behavior patterns of anyone who is spiritually elevated. If you find anybody who claims to be spiritual and very narrow-minded, very fanatical, then you can say there is absolutely no spirituality. So spirituality and narrow-mindedness, spirituality and little-mindedness cannot go together. On the other hand, you find many people, sometimes you find people, there have been a few great men in the world, very broad-minded. They were not conventional believers in God. They were not disbelievers either. They were not unbelievers. They did not discard religion. They would criticize religion. They were not anti-conformists necessarily, but they were not what you normally call conventional believers in any established religious systems or faith systems. But they don't denigrate, they don't discard, they don't criticize anybody. But I can give an example. Perhaps most of you are familiar with Gandhiji. Gandhiji was one of the greatest spiritual personalities of 20th century. Everyone knows. You know, Gandhiji very rarely went to temples. But he himself claimed to be a staunch Hindu. But very rarely he went to temples. Very often Gandhiji, when he travelled all over India, he went to some temple towns. Where anyone will go there, will visit that temple. Gandhi didn't go. And people didn't criticize him either. So Gandhi found real spirituality does not go against temples, churches or places of worship, but it goes beyond them. That's all. You have to remember, spirituality never contradicts religions. Spirituality goes beyond religions. It is not confined to established religious dogmas or scriptures, but it doesn't reject. Because anyone who grows in spiritual life becomes broad-minded. He or she never rejects anything, but goes beyond. So Gandhiji went beyond temples and churches and mosques and places of worship. But Gandhiji never criticized. Gandhiji has written a foreword to Sri Ramakrishna's Gospel, you find. Yes, Gandhiji you can find. Now, and then 10th called the Ahimsa, as you had. This is another important behavior pattern. So you find, if you are fully established in any one of these characteristics, then you find simultaneously you get fully established in all other characteristics. See, Ahimsa, non-violence. Non-violence confined to the physical level may be possible. But non-violence as a philosophy of life, as a deep-rooted mental attitude towards not only our life but towards the entire creation, is possible only for a spiritual person. And once you are established in that, then you are not afraid of anyone, you become upright, your heart becomes pure, then you become steadfast, and you become naturally benevolent. Not benevolence as a policy, but benevolence as a natural human characteristic, not as a policy. See, non-violence also should not be policy. It becomes a natural human characteristic. It becomes impossible for you to be violent, either physically, mentally, intellectually, or psychologically. That's what Sri Krishna tries to drive home. And then he says Satyam. Satyam means truthfulness. Truthfulness is a universal value, but truthfulness, in a way, sometimes it is explained as being steadfast, upright in word, thought, and deed. What we speak, when we speak, we should mean what we are speaking. And we should try to do what we are speaking. And we should be thinking something related to what we are speaking. So, mentally, at the thought level, physically, at the action level, and verbally, at the word level, if we are steadfast, upright, it is called truthfulness in Vedantic sense. Akrodha means, you freedom from anger, naturally. If you are established in non-violence, if you are established in the complete sense of unity of creation, if you look upon entire human family as your family, then there is no room for anger, hatred, for any of these things. And then Tyaga means renunciation. The idea is you give up all desire for, all obsession with worldly pleasures. And Shanti means peacefulness. Peace is a natural characteristic of these people. In fact, peace has got two dimensions. Peace as an attitude, as you said, as a behavior pattern, and peace as an experience. Peace as an attitude becomes well established when it is based on inner peace. When we are at peace with ourselves, we can really be at peace with the whole creation. That's again a natural result of non-violence, fearlessness, a sense of unity of human family, human creation, and so on. And then many other qualities are given. Daya is given. Daya means mercifulness, compassion. All these become natural. As one develops these spiritual qualities, these characteristics become natural. But in the beginning, one should try to develop stage by stage. That's what Lord Krishna implies here. One should make deliberate effort to develop these qualities and try to practice these qualities in our action and behavior, and also, much more important, in our attitude. And then they become natural. And then a few other qualities are given. Tejakshama, Dhriti Saujam, Adruho, Nadimanida, bhavanti sampadam devim abhijadasya bharata. This is the third verse. I shall translate in English and explain. Another characteristic that is explained is vigor. Laziness is the very antithesis of spirituality. Physical and mental vigor. See, spirituality is not a passive existence. Spirituality should be related to a dynamic, active behavior pattern in our attitude towards the entire creation. And then patience. Patience, anyone who is established in inner peace, inner tranquility, will be patient. Impatience is the result of dissatisfaction, discontentment. Anyone who is established in fearlessness, non-violence, and who is not at all obsessed with external physical comforts, he can never be Then fortitude. Spirituality or these divine qualities do not imply that one should become weak-minded. One should be, inactive. Fortitude is a natural characteristic of these great spiritual personalities. Purity of heart and harmlessness. One important characteristic of anyone who grows in spiritual life is that he won't be afraid of anyone. He won't fear any harm from anyone, and no one will have any reason to be afraid of him. Yasmanu dijate logo, loganu dijate chaya. You find in the 12th chapter, Bhakti Yoga, the characteristics of an ideal devotee is mentioned here. A really spiritual person, an enlightened person, he will have no reason to be afraid of anyone, and no one would have any reason to be afraid of him. Because that's the characteristic. He's completely rooted, established in non-violence. And benevolence, broad-mindedness, inner peace. All these characteristics he's experiencing or she's experiencing. But along with that, anyone who is coming in contact with him also will get a little of this inner peace. It's contagious. Spirituality is contagious. It's like a disease. Spirituality is contagious. Bad quality is also contagious. So in the presence of anyone who is established in these qualities, you can feel that inner peace transmits. So these are and then he will be completely free from vanity. Vanity again is rooted in the feeling that I and my neighbor are two different entities. I have to gain something from another person. The feeling of difference, the feeling that another person and me, the otherness, that is the real fundamental cause of vanity, all these qualities. So these are the qualities we see Krishna as the teacher of Gita has mentioned in the 16th chapter as desirable qualities, the divine attributes which every spiritual seeker should try to develop. And then Lord Krishna also gives a warning. There are certain undesirable characteristics that we must guard against. This is a long list. They're given from, there are a few things that we be careful about. What we must develop and what we must try to guard ourselves against. We must avoid. From 4th verse onwards, Dambho darpo abhimanascha krodha parushymevacha ajnanam cha abhijadasya partha sambho mansuri. Now, these characteristics are given. One is pretentiousness, putting an air. See, whenever you find somebody trying to be somebody else, there is neither spirituality nor purity. Anyone who tries to be other than what he is. It is said psychologically, every attempt to be a diplomat, trying to create an artificial atmosphere, trying to create an artificial layer over our personality, without trying to be natural to ourselves. Sometimes people try to create an artificial layer around their personality. See, reading Dale Carnegie's, Making Friends in Business and Winning Friends and such things, It is good, these books are very useful, but then they should be confined to certain activities like business or industry. It should not become a policy of philosophy of human life. So one should try to be oneself. That's the idea being. So to be natural to ourselves is one easy path to spirituality. Any attempt to become artificial. Psychologically, this is very important, very, very important. You find any attempt to run away from our true nature, an attempt to create an artificial layer around us, may help us, but you find some of the most astute diplomats, people who had to behave in a very sweet diplomatic style, will suffer from hypertension, stress and so on. Why? Because within mind there is a lot of tension and stress, but they cannot express it. Outwardly they have to smile and shake hands and be sweet in all behavior. So here Lord Krishna makes, the teacher of Gita makes an important statement. Dambha means it. So this pretentiousness, trying to be somebody else, that is psychologically very damaging. First of all, it blocks our natural progress in spiritual life. Because we try to be somebody other than ourselves. And that, as I said, creates a natural layer of our own personality. So our natural progress is blocked. So Lord Krishna gives a lot of importance to this dambha, pretentiousness, arrogance. That is also arrogance again. It is damaging to ourselves and damaging towards the entire human family. Because when we try to be superior to others, greater than others, that is again rooted in the idea that other and me are two different entities. It is just the opposite of the earlier quality mentioned, which is one of the divine quality. That is, we should try to develop the idea that the entire human family is one entity. The humanity is one spiritual family. So pretentiousness, arrogance, and then pride, then anger, rudeness, and being insensitive towards others. As I said, spirituality makes us more and more humane. As I said earlier, spirituality is something very abstract. But then it has got certain expressions which you can never miss when you come across. One is, a spiritual person will be very humane. And again, he will be very broad-minded. So, insensitiveness, not being sensitive towards other people's sufferings, it is one of the undesirable demoniac qualities, diabolical undesirable qualities with the teacher of Gita outlines. So complete insensitivity to spiritual values. These are found among certain people who are demoniac by nature. So I have given just a brief description. There are many commentaries written on these subjects which are elaborate interpretations. In Sanskrit language, you can say around to find here. So based on that, I have given some ideas here. Any other topic for discussion? This topic also can, if there is any doubt, any more. For the list continues. Remember that the number of denominators, which I will not desire to continue that. Our policy, our attitude should be to move towards the east. That will actually take us away from the west. So once we try to concentrate, once we try to develop the divine attributes, naturally we will be away from the undesirable characteristics. So, but still, if there are any other topics which you like me to discuss.
Swami, can I ask a question about meditation?
Yes.
If your chosen ideal is the one reality without a second, when you sit down to meditate, what do you actually end up doing?
Meditate, but what should be the focus of meditation?
Right.
Yes.
The object, yeah.
Yes, yes. We discussed this earlier.
I'm sorry.
Now, according to non-dualistic philosophy, as I said, there is only one reality, which is the immanent principle, which is also omnipresent, and the transcendental principle. If you try to meditate following the path of non-dualistic philosophy, you should concentrate, you should try to make use of your reason. See, I shall tell you. Just again, see, am I this body? Am I this mind? Am I these senses? Because the senses are certainly changing, objects are changing, mind also is fluctuating, even intellect also is not always steady. So they can't be the reality. There should be a reality beyond all this. So once we go on negating these non-real things, we finally come to a conclusion that there is something which I can't deny, I can't negate, which is beyond and which is different from all this, which remains. See, I cannot say I don't exist. So who is the I? This I should be the universal spirituality. And as a beginner, one should try to concentrate on this supreme consciousness as present in one's own heart. The supreme consciousness present and immanent in one's own heart. See, thoughts with conflicting thoughts, thought currents, images, memories, all this will emerge in the mind when you try to meditate. Very natural. Now, we should take care not to identify with any of these conflicting thought currents. Because most of these unreal images, memories and thought currents and conflicting ideas which emerge on the mind will try to drag our mind towards them. But once we realize that, once we understand they are not real, the mind won't identify. We won't identify ourselves with those experiences. Some of the experiences and memories will be related to the person who is trying to meditate. But you should remember that those experiences were related to my personality as a body, but I am actually not this body or the senses or mind. Because these memories, past memories and conflicting thought currents will come and they will create obstacles in focusing your mind on the Supreme Consciousness. So in such cases, one should try to use one's reason. It is not an easy path. Meditation according to non-dualistic system is not easy, but one should have a strong will and should work hard to feed the mind with good thoughts and good ideas so that bad ideas and bad thoughts will naturally be neutralized. So one should try to dissociate oneself with all these thoughts and conflicting current images and ideas which naturally come to the surface of the mind the moment you try to meditate. The moment you try to meditate, as I said earlier, you are just trying to swim against the current. If you are just floating according to the current, there will be no problem. But the moment you start moving against the current, then this strong current will try to drag you into its own direction. Similarly, these thoughts are like waves, strong thought currents which try to drag our mind in their direction. So we must try to neutralize the strength of these conflicting thoughts by feeding the mind with good thoughts so that good memories also will come to the surface. For example, if you feed your mind with ideas which are helpful in spiritual life, good books, holy books, or lives of holy spiritual personalities, those ideas, those thoughts, those who are established in meditative life, those ideas will be encouraging, will be helpful in meditative process. That will slowly help us in focusing our mind on the Supreme Consciousness meeting. But this is very important. One should try to play oneself the role. You should try to put yourself in the role of a witness, not as an actor. You should be a spectator watching the drama. Thoughts will come, ideas will come. All right, you are coming. All right, you become and sit here. But I am trying to meditate. You don't participate in the drama of conflicting thought currents emerging in the mind. Just look at them, watch them, but you are not at all involved. They won't. Then they will have no problem. They won't disturb you. But for that, it's very important. One should succeed in training one's mind, in dissociating with those thought currents. Otherwise, you will try to identify. Once you identify yourself with this emerging negative thoughts, you are lost. So it is called applying the witness attitude. It is not emptying of the mind. It is rather dissolving the mind in the Supreme Consciousness. That's the idea. I hope it's clear. These are some of the methods. So one easy path is try to feed our mind with good thoughts, good food. See, when you eat good food, you become physically healthy. When you feed your mind with good thoughts, mind also becomes healthy. That's the idea. We will have a long interaction session up to 8:30. Right now, I was just asking for suggestions. This we can continue after 8:30. At 8:30, we'll continue. Till 8:30, we'll meditate. Now the 6th chapter of Gita deals with Dhyana Yoga. It is called communion through meditation. As I mentioned at the beginning, the first and second classes, Gita opens 4 different paths for spiritual progress, depending upon our own temperament, our own natural tendencies. We can choose any of these paths. There are people who are of an active type, mostly. They give importance to doing things with their hands or with their brain, intellectual work or physical work, whatever may be. They may not be much given to reasoning. Such people can progress in spiritual life by converting their action into a yoga. Now, yoga here has got a very important implication. It is not yoga as it is popular these days, as understood. Hatha yoga, physical exercise. Yoga here means a method of converting our path into a spiritual practice. That's what is yoga. Yoga means communion in itself, joining, coming together. So karma becomes karma yoga when you combine karma with yoga. Karma means action. Any activity is karma. Karma becomes karma yoga when you convert action or karma into a spiritual practice. Then it becomes yoga. Karma can become karma yoga when you perform your duties, whatever you do, your actions, with a spiritual ideal behind it. The spiritual ideal is non-attachment towards the results of action. This is the ideal. Non-attachment, absence of desire for the results of action, plus action means yoga. So action plus non-attachment towards the result of action means karma yoga. I already explained at the very beginning. Karma normally makes us tired physically, tired mentally, makes us anxious for the results of actions. If the results are not up to the expectation, we become depressed. We become disappointed. If the results are more than our expectation, then we become overjoyed. So sometimes when an action produces happy results, which make us overjoyed, then we will have a tendency to do that action even when there is no need for that kind of action. And when an action sometimes produces a result which is not very happy, not very pleasant, then we may try to avoid that action even if that action is very much necessary. So we are actually attached to the result, not necessarily to action. But one can work, one can do one's duties properly, without any anxiety, without any possibility of depression, if he does or she does it without any idea of result, or any desire for the results of those actions, any attachment to the result of those actions, then becomes karma yoga. So bhakti also becomes bhakti yoga. Bhakti actually means devotion. Devotion also. Either you listen to ideas related to spiritual ideas. Of course, Bhakti Yoga is directly related to belief in God. Remember, Bhakti Yoga has direct relationship with belief in God. So, you can establish a close relationship with God as God's servants, as God's friend, as God's devotee. All the human relations which normally a person engages in can be sublimated into a spiritual path leading to the realization of God. This is called Bhakti Yoga, or communion through devotion. Bhakti Yoga means communion with God through devotion. Jnana Yoga means a path of knowledge. We can use our reasoning or intellect. If we exercise our intellect and reasoning, we can very easily find out that there is this physical world which is moving, changing, transforming, which is not eternal, which is not real in the true sense of the term, which is subject to changes. So there should be something which is unchanging, and that is supreme consciousness, which is the immanent principle present in everything, everybody, which is the immanent and also omnipresent, all-pervading principle, which is also transcendent reality. And then Raja Yoga. Raja Yoga, Hatha Yoga is just a training for proper posture, so that you can sit and meditate and try to realize the supreme goal through psychic control. So these are the 4 paths. I don't want to go into those details. We are now coming to Dhyana Yoga, where Dhyana or meditation becomes a means, an instrument for one's spiritual progress. We have say 47 verses in this chapter, and we have perhaps 7 classes. I shall take some important verses. These are very important in spiritual life. At the very beginning, in the first verse, Lord Krishna makes a very interesting statement. What is the true sign of a man of God? Man of God means spiritually enlightened person. The sign, the most important characteristic of a spiritual seeker is that he will be completely free from attachment towards anything in this world. It doesn't mean that he will be inactive. That point is made very clear here. He will be active, but at the same time, he will be completely non-attached. He will be free from any kind of attachment. As I said earlier, it is attachment that on the one hand blocks our spiritual progress, and on the other hand it creates conflicts in our mind, and also it creates conflict with other people. So how one can actually practice meditation as a means to spiritual progress? So the first condition given here in the first and second verses is this: true renunciation, true sannyasa, true spiritual progress, true spiritual enlightenment comes only through perfect non-attachment and not through inaction. This is the first principle that is explained in the first 2 verses. Anashada karma phalam karyam karma karotyeha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niraktir na chakriyaha yam sannyasam prahu yogam tam vidhi vandava nahi asanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. The important principle is mentioned here, life of renunciation, spiritual pursuit, or meditative pursuit becomes possible. It is technically called sannyasa here. I am not going to those details in this context. It's possible only through perfect non-attachment, renunciation of our results. Mentally, one should remain completely free from attachment, choose whatever we do. Now, in the third verse, there is an important principle which is related to normal human pursuits. Though renunciation of means mentally renouncing the result is mentioned here, non-attachment is mentioned here, it is never desirable for anyone to show any indifference or any inaptitude, lack of interest in performing one's duties and responsibilities. Here the word renunciation is mentioned. Renunciation, psychologically, mentally renouncing all obsession for worldly pleasures. This idea behind. Gita does not tell you to run away from the world. Gita never tells you to give up this world or to adopt a negative attitude towards worldly life. That's not the approach of Gita. What Gita does is, it teaches you how to live in this world intelligently. Because when we live in this world full of desires and conflicts and attachments and worries, what really happens? You may be the best of or the most successful businessman in the world. You may be the most efficient, a workaholic, putting up 15 hours or 12 hours every day, hard work. One may succeed in worldly pursuits. But after some time, suddenly there is a shocking revelation that mentally we become incapable of enjoying the results of our work. Anxiety, neurosis, depression, schizophrenia, all these problems. In fact, in the Gita, the dialogue is between two men of action. One a king, another a king. Both are kings, in fact. Both are princes, men of action. So Krishna tells us, normally when we are bound to do our duties and responsibilities, that action itself becomes a path leading to the highest spiritual communion, highest spiritual enlightenment. Why? Because when we try to convert action into action without desire, that is karma into karma yoga, what happens? The action which normally binds us to the world, which creates problems in life, becomes a path towards not only spiritual progress but also material progress. One can live in this world a happy material life, at the same time free from the problems associated with too much of material comforts. This is what Krishna says. So, for those who are beginners in spiritual life, who are about to ascend the path leading to the highest spiritual communion, work with perfect detachment to the result is the instrument, the means, the path leading to spiritual progress. But those who are advanced in spiritual life, for them, detached work or work without desire becomes natural. So they need not concentrate on action without desire, because of their spiritual progress, they naturally become detached from the results of action, but they never become inactive. They may continue their action, but they can be free from the anxieties and the conflicts and all these problems associated with action. And for them, they can lead their life in perfect introspection. That is the implication of the third verse. Arurukshor munir yogam karma karana muchide yoga rudhasya taseva shama karana muchide. Third verse says, for one who has not reached the highest of spiritual life, for them they have to work, because our senses naturally become involved in various actions. We cannot just deliberately, forcibly withdraw the 5 senses of action and 5 senses of perception from external objects. It is impossible. Even if we mentally try to withdraw our senses of action and senses of perception from external objects, still we will mentally be involved in different actions. Physically, we will succeed in withdrawing senses of action and senses of perception from external objects, from the attachment to external objects. Physically, we can stop working with our hands, but then we may sit somewhere, we may relax ourselves, but mentally we will be thinking about what we could have enjoyed if we could work with our hands. So mentally, one can never remain free from action. Mental thoughts, mental dreaming, mental imagination also is a work. So what Lord Krishna says is, be active, but at the same time remain detached, means non-attached, because that will keep the mind in perfect concentration on the Supreme Consciousness. In Gita it's called Atman. If one can be always in a state of perfect communion with one's own inner self, at the same time be active outside, that is the ideal of spiritual life. So introspection for advanced spiritual seekers and active life plus meditation for the beginners. This is what's meant here. If one can combine action with meditation, then it is a royal path leading to spiritual progress, inner tranquility and inner peace. This is the implication of the third verse of the 6th chapter. This point here. Now, another very important point that is pointed out here in this chapter, the 5th verse, Uddhared Atmanatmanam Natmanam Avasadi Atmaiva Hyatmano Buddhu Atmaiva Ripuratmana. In the 5th verse we find. There, Lord Krishna says, generally, there is always a conflict, there is inner conflict that we are facing. In any action, behind any thought you find. On the one hand, there is the higher self. We are trying to do certain things in a correct way. Our intellect is trying to do certain things in a correct way and trying not to do certain things in a wrong way. At the same time, our mind is always attached to the senses, is trying to drag our personality in the opposite direction. This conflict you can find always nowadays. This is what is going on within mind. The lower and higher. The lower nature and higher nature. Or that you can find in the most, even among the most hardened criminals, people who do undesirable things. There is somewhere something within them trying to prevent them from doing what is undesirable. It's always there. At the same time, there is the other lower self which is dragging the poor person into undesirable actions and activities. Now, by trying to reinforce, enrich good tendencies, good impressions through good actions, good deeds, and good thoughts, we must try to enrich, reinforce the higher self. We must try always to prevent our mind from being brought down by the lower self. On the one hand, senses are trying to drag the mind in one direction. On the other hand, the intellect is convinced that certain activities are not good and certain activities are desirable. So we must do certain things in certain ways. We must not do certain things in certain ways. This is always in conflict. So what Lord Krishna says is, by concentrating on good deeds, good words and good thoughts, we must try to enrich and reinforce the higher self. Because the five senses of perception are bringing ideas and thought currents and tendencies into human mind. So, by diverting these five senses, the eyes, the ears, the sense of touch, the sense of smell and the sense of taste, all the five senses of perception, they are trying to drag our mind towards external objects. When we hear a sound with our ears are actually trying to drag the mind towards the object which produces the sound. When you see an object, the eyes are trying to drag the mind towards the object. When we taste something and it feels wonderful, then the sense of taste is dragging the mind towards that object. And so on it happens. Smell also, touch also. This is what happens. So every minute, mind is being dragged by the five senses towards different objects. Now, how to prevent the mind from being dragged towards these external objects? We cannot do it just by withdrawing senses. I won't see the object anymore. And if you close your eyes, mentally you will be seeing the object only. If you take a decision, I won't hear that sound, then mentally you will be hearing the sound. So even if we physically succeed in withdrawing the senses, mentally we won't succeed. So the great teachers of ancient times say that we have to divert, we have to channelize these five senses towards spiritually stimulating ideas, objects, words and different things which are helpful in spiritual life. Which I said earlier, if our mind is filled with ideas, thoughts and words which are related to spiritual life, then when we try to meditate, negative thoughts, negative tendencies will not come to the surface. Positive ideas will come. So Lord Krishna says, the teacher of Gita says, one should always uplift one's lower self by the higher self. We must try to lift the mind to the level of the intellect. The intellect may have a strong tendency for spiritual pursuits, but mind is moving the opposite direction. So we must always try to uplift the lower mind to the higher level, to the level of the higher self. And one should never try to lower oneself by being attracted by the tendencies and the impressions brought in by the senses. If we give full freedom to the senses, then we'll be enslaved by the senses. If we try to get freedom from senses, from the tyranny of senses, then senses will become our master. There are only two parts in spiritual life. Either the senses become your instruments, or you become a slave of the senses. Freedom for senses means spiritual slavery. Freedom from senses means spiritual mastery. Freedom for senses leads to spiritual slavery, spiritual entanglement. And freedom from senses leads to spiritual growth. That's the approach in the Gita. So, that's why in the next verse, Lord Krishna makes a very remarkable statement. To him or to her who has completely subdued the lower self by the higher self, means to a person who has attained control over her or his senses, mind becomes a great friend. Your mind becomes the best friend. A mind which is not dragged towards external objects by the senses is the best friend. Because that mind helps you. It guides you the right path. It protects you. It gives a warning signal whenever there is the possibility of danger. A red light. On the other hand, a mind which is dragged about, tossed about by the tyranny of the senses, that mind is your worst enemy. That mind becomes a tyrant, the worst enemy. It leads to spiritual destruction and also material destruction. In fact, it is the cause of all problems. So, bandhuratmatmanastasya yenatmaivatmanajitaha anatmanastu shatrutve vartayad atmaiva shatruvat. In the 6th verse, those who are interested. 6th verse, very famous statement is here. The one for whom the mind is completely free from the tyranny of senses, a mind which is not dragged towards external objects, a mind which is not tossed about by the senses. For him or for her, mind is the best friend. Mind becomes a friend, guide and philosopher. It becomes a friend in times of crisis. It guides you and also it teaches you the right path. So it becomes a friend, philosopher and guide. For one whose mind is not listening to the dictation of senses. A mind which is completely free from the tyranny of senses. On the other hand, for anyone whose mind is dictated by the senses, tyrannized by senses, for such a person, mind is the worst enemy because that mind is being dragged by the 5 senses into all kinds of actions. And that person is a helpless victim in the hands of the mind, which has become his worst enemy. So, very important statement is made here. In fact, this is closely related to meditative life. Meditation is a process by which we are trying to free the mind from enslavement, from slavery, from the tyranny of the senses. Meditation is the one process. Because when we sit and meditate, mind will naturally throw up all types of undesirable thought currents. And when we keep ourselves away from any association with those tendencies, then those tendencies will not bother us. When we identify, finished, then we will be victimized, we will be enslaved by the senses, by the objects, by the tendencies and also by the lower mind. But if we can sit and watch at the undesirable tendencies and impressions which are emerging in the mind when we try to meditate, if you can just sit and watch without any identification, stare at these thoughts without identifying ourselves with those tendencies and impressions, then they won't bother us. Then we can we can free the mind from the tyranny of the senses. This idea is very graphically brought out in this 6th verse, and we'll continue this class. In the next session we'll continue the same discussion. So now we'll conclude. Om, peace, peace.